Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a couple of examples of the mess that our new Brexit customs system is in from the point of view of a lorry driver and an importing trader. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So at various points in this video, I'm going to be asking people sort of put themselves in someone else's position as described in the video. And for many viewers, this might be quite natural indeed. But I am told that amongst Brexit supporters, there is a notable lack of empathy. So it may take a little bit of extra effort, but it's worth the effort. And the other thing about viewers in general is thanks very much, because basically one of these snippets I'd come across anyway, the other one I had not. And viewers are very helpful in pointing me towards things that may be of interest, and sometimes they absolutely are. And with these two snippets, lots of people were pointing me to them. They were things that I'd talked about before Christmas. These were inevitable. They weren't surprising. They weren't really news. But I was waiting for actual accounts of them happening. And the first is via a Polish lorry periodical, which relays the story of a lorry driver entering Kent, trying to get out of the country. With all the correct paperwork completed, well, I'm not going to say here, oh, complicated process, of course, humans make mistakes and, it was all natural. They hadn't made any mistakes other than coming to the UK after Brexit. They'd completed their paperwork correctly. They had their Kent access permit. So before you're even allowed in the county of Kent, this was a border no one predicted that would have an internal border around Kent. For a lorry driver trying to get out of the country, you're not even allowed in the county unless you've got that permit. He had the permit, but he still found the journey maddeningly stressful. He attended the lorry park in Ashford, and he was then told to, that's the big one by the way, I'll come back to that. He was then told to go to a different one while his documents were checked. Now here's the thing, straight away I would think, hang on a minute, we're supposed to have this marvellous IT system where you do everything in advance, so that way you don't need checks when you get to Dover. It's all done in advance. When the IT system says yeah, it's all grand, you get your Kent access permit, in you go. Might need to be a last little thing, but you should be straight through. And he had his permit, but there was clearly more time needed for the UK customs side to organise things, presumably related to either lack of staffing or lack of training. Remember, we need 50,000 new bureaucrats to be able to work all this. I don't even know how many were recruited. The government seem to be a little bit forgetful whenever they're asked, oh, how many have recruited then, Mr. Gove? Oh, I'm not sure. Is it more than 10? I don't know. So we don't know. So it may be a training issue, maybe a staffing issue, maybe both. And so then 2 days later, he was told to then go back to the Ashford lorry park, the big one. Now remember, he had his IT system green light. He had his Kent access permit, but he still had to wait 2 more days for the human interface side of this, so to speak, be satisfied. And so then he returned to Ashford to find out it was full. Now, okay, for all those who are still paying far too much attention to John Redwood, where's the lorries, John, who are trying to say, oh, where's all these delays then? Where's all these delays? Where's all these delays? The Ashford lorry park, which is absolutely massive, 27 acres in size. Now, I don't know what its capacity is at the moment. It was scheduled to be completed by the end of January, which means presumably not all of those 27 acres are available for lorries, but it's still absolutely massive. There's loads of lorries in it. That's where the delays are. We've jammed them into the lorry parks. There were so many delays at this point last week that the Ashford lorry park was full. Full. It's truly enormous, and it was full. So he was told to go to another lorry park. Oh, come to Ashford. Goes to Ashford. Sorry, we're full. Go to another one. At this point, the Kent access permit had expired. Don't last forever. The idea of the system, as communicated to us by the government, is you get your paperwork in order. When it's in order, when the IT system, yeah, this is all fine, you get your Kent access permit. You're then just supposed to largely make your way to Dover. Yes, we know there's checkpoints, direct to a lorry park if it's a bit busy, and then, on your way through. But you're supposed to be largely just waiting. You've done it all. You've done your stuff. Maybe there needs to be a physical check. Sure, okay. But again, you're supposed to just be able to go straight through. But if there are delays, like I said, lorries at the port that haven't done everything correctly, or there's more checks than normal and it's backing up a bit, Then you go to your lorry park until it's time to go. It's not supposed to last days. You know, this is why the Kent access permit doesn't have, you know, if it was intended to last 3 or 4 days, then the access permit would last for 3 or 4 days. But through no fault of this lorry driver or his company, or as far as may be told the company's customers, he has been delayed so long that the permit expired. Now, this now meant that he was illegally in Kent. Even though he entered the county with the permit, he was given an automatic fine of £300 for being in Kent without a valid Kent access permit, even though he entered with it, and he'd complied with all the instructions from UK officials at this point. You know, now at this point, I'd like to say how shocked I am at this. In truth, I'm just embarrassed that this is the image of the UK that Brexit Britain is projecting to the world. In reality, like I said at the start, I was waiting for something like this. I said last year that this would be inevitable. You know, I'm not a haulage expert, but I'd been reading from people at the top of the haulage industry how the system was emerging, and it was very obvious to me that we were bringing out a complex, over-bloated IT system that would inevitably yield a result at some point that a driver is told that they're fine and they should just proceed, but another part of the system would say, no, we're not sure about this. It was inevitable because you've got all these bolt-on systems. You know, I said that people would be fined unfairly as a result. I'm not an IT expert by any stretch. If I foresaw this, everyone involved would have. And they would have been warning the government. Ministers would have been aware of this. I imagine they'd have even been advised to extend temporarily the amount of time that the permit lasts, you know, to avoid issues like this. What's the harm? Just make it last a week or something like that, just to be sure. Just as a temporary measure. Now, because, consider this, that lorry driver will now be reluctant ever to run the UK again. You know, times that by all the lorry drivers who will have had a similar experience. And then times that by all the lorry drivers they'll have talked to. They may have not done a UK run yet, or they may have done and they may have got through, you know, all right, relatively easily. But they won't fancy the risk of something like this happening to them. They'll think, oh, I'm not sure about that. You know, meaning that EU-based lorry drivers will be less inclined to make those runs. This was reported in like a Polish truckers journal. So lots of people in the industry would have read that and go, oh, I don't fancy some of that. You know, we don't have enough EU permits for British lorry drivers to compensate for the loss of EU lorry drivers. We don't have enough British lorry drivers, full stop, even if we did have the permits. But that's not, you know, where it ends with this chaotic mess. Because like someone as ignorant of the finer workings of haulage, such as myself, I've not worked in haulage, might imagine that, okay, all of this messing about, and we can imagine this poor lorry driver queuing up in his lorry, official comes out to see him, goes, oh, go there, go there, go there, go there. No. The drivers have to get out of their lorry and queue up in the pissing rain and freezing winter wind to get to the customs office. That queue was lasting for 4 hours. They were out in that weather for 4 hours to get to the customs office. Now, this is where I'd like you to imagine yourself in the shoes of this Polish lorry driver and then ask yourself, in all seriousness, if you would be keen to repeat that experience. So the system is a complete shambles for lorry drivers in a very self-defeating way. So then what's it like for customers, the importers and the exporters? Well, there was another thread written by a wine merchant, which I'll also link below, an importer from the EU. Now, he began his business in 1992. So you get the impression he's been in the business for a while. He knows what he's doing. And he now fears for the future of that business. And this one was clued up. You know, when you read about the preparations he undertook, quite impressive. You know, there will be a lot of businesses that have actually been caught out by the new customs arrangement. I know that there were, in fact. You know, not exactly helped with the lack of government involvement. You know, because our government spent 2020 trying to persuade us that Brexit wasn't going to be a problem and that they had plans for everything. But at the same time, they kept telling people to prepare. They were telling business, oh, you need to prepare. But they weren't giving out too many details as to what to do to prepare, because then that would shine a light on the fact that Brexit was expected to be a massive trade barrier, which they wanted to avoid talking about. But this guy was on top of it. Oh, he wasn't reliant on the government telling him what to do. He was completely on top of it. Nice and early, he applied for all the extra registrations he needed so that he'd have everything needed to carry on trading after Brexit. He got it all sorted long before he needed to. He also bought in enough stock to get himself through a messy January. So it'd be all right up until February if there were problems. There were problems. Frankly, from what this guy is explaining, I'm not an expert, but I don't see how he could have done any better in preparing. Everything that I've sort of researched about what businesses needed to have done last year and were impeded from doing, this guy's done. It must have been a lot of effort on his part. Put simply, this represents a business with a way above average level of preparation for Brexit. In fact, when surveys were going out about businesses, and it kept returning results of very few businesses, very tiny minority thought that they were ready for Brexit. This guy was probably the one who was saying he was ready for Brexit. At the start of January, he started using Chief. Now, this is the customs handling of import and export freight. I talked about this system last year. It's been a system that they couldn't use last year. They couldn't use it. There was no implementation period. It only came online for EU imports on the 1st of January, or technically 11 p.m, I suppose, on the 31st of December. And that meant that it was coming online for use for EU imports. It already existed for imports from elsewhere, with no widespread testing, with end users. If you don't import from the rest of the world, if you only import from the EU, you've never used it before, and you've had no opportunity to familiarise yourself with it or report problems to be fixed before it needed to be used for EU imports. And the merchant described the previous system as being really easy to use. He said after 40 years of tweaking, it was blinding. He says the Chief system, he says, was designed years ago, it was built years ago, but it wasn't designed to handle EU imports. Now, the next thing he says is actually where the main problem comes in. So I talked last year about how the new customs system is really, I think it's about 9 or 10 different systems, some of which were built independently and then bolted together at the end. So the intention was to integrate them all into a single working system. Without even being an IT expert, I can see that's a disaster waiting to happen. And sure enough, this is what's happened. So this wine merchant entered their stuff on Chief and then discovered that, the Haulier uses a different system that overwrites onto Chief. The bottom line is that the system is not working properly. They can do all their stuff right and it all gets messed up. And what is more, he says this is the only aspect of customs and revenue where you look on the website and there isn't a phone number for support. There is no direct contact for support. So you have to put in, presumably as an email, and there's a full week, 5 working days turnaround on getting that support from staff. So all that means, of course, your just-in-time supply chain is knackered, it's gone, doesn't exist. To get stock, you are going to have to allow a ridiculous amount of time. And then, of course, on top of that, there's all the extra costs. There are fees to use these various IT systems. And it's a monthly fee, he said, as well. It's quite a lot as well. You don't just pay a registration charge and it's government system, you just log on to it. No, they charge you for it monthly. There are costs for filling in the incredibly complicated digital forms. There are costs associated with staffing costs if you have to try and get support from HMRC. Because even if, like in this guy, you do it yourself, you're the business owner, well, your time is still worth money. So there's still effectively a cost to you having to spend this extra time doing it. And just as I asked you to imagine yourself to be in the position of this Polish lorry driver, now try another thought experiment. Imagine yourself, read what this wine merchant thread has had to say, and imagine what would happen if you were a small business owner that didn't have his experience or didn't have his aptitude for coping with entirely new systems. There'll be a lot of businesses that go under because the people running them they were running their business perfectly well, but they just don't have the capabilities to operate in this very different environment now. They built their business in the EU single market, which, despite what Brexiteers claim, actually removed bureaucracy. Removed it. That's another Brexit lie exposed. Now that bureaucracy is back with a vengeance, and not everyone is cut out to deal with it. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.